When my son told me that I wouldn't be welcome at his house for Christmas, I just smiled, got into my truck, and made a single phone call. Before the new year, I had their mortgage payments stopped, and that was only the start of my plan. Justice had to be served, and their arrogance needed to be punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we get into it, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I could make my famous roast beef this year, I said, settling deeper into Ben's leather couch. The one with the rosemary potatoes your mother used to love. Remember how she always said it was better than her own grandmother's? The words just hung there in the warm air, mixed with the smell of Jessica's expensive vanilla candles. Ben shifted next to me, his wedding band catching the light from their 10-foot Christmas tree. Something about his posture tensed up, his shoulders hunching forward like he was bracing for bad news. "Dad, unfortunately you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I blinked. Sure, I must have heard him wrong. "What do you mean? Why wouldn't I be welcome?" Ben couldn't look me in the eye. His gaze was glued to the marble coffee table, the one I'd helped him pick out last spring after Jessica decided their old furniture wasn't sophisticated enough. "Jessica's parents are coming, and they'd prefer if you weren't here." My hands felt suddenly cold. "They'd prefer?" "It's just easier this way, Dad. You know how her family is about their traditions. They have their own way of doing things." His voice got quieter with every word, as if he were shrinking. I looked around the living room. I saw the silk curtains I'd paid for when Jessica complained about privacy, the hardwood floors that had come from my second mortgage, and the crown molding that had maxed out my credit card. Every single inch of this house was marked by my sacrifice, my love for my son. "Their own way," I repeated slowly. "And what way is that, Ben?" He flinched. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Through the archway to the kitchen, I could see Jessica's new Viking stand mixer, the professional-grade one she insisted she needed for a holiday baking hobby that lasted all of 3 weeks. $2,000 of my money sitting there, probably used twice since October. Where am I supposed to spend Christmas then? The question came out softer than I'd intended. Ben's face looked pained. "Maybe you could, I don't know, visit Aunt Carol, or we could do something the weekend after?" The weekend after. As if Christmas was just another appointment you could reschedule. I stood up, my knees aching after 8 years of carrying this weight by myself. "I see." "Dad, wait." But I was already walking to the door, past the family photos where my face seemed to get smaller and more distant in every new picture, past the coat closet holding Jessica's $1,000 jackets. My hand found the doorknob, solid and cold. "Son," I said without turning around, "tell Jessica's parents I said Merry Christmas." The December air hit me like a slap as I walked to my truck. I heard Ben call my name once and then the soft click of the door shutting behind me. Final. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment with the engine off, just watching the Christmas lights twinkle in the windows of a house I would never be welcome in. My phone buzzed. It was probably Ben, wanting to smooth things over with empty promises. I didn't answer. I just started the engine and drove into the night, leaving the warm glow of the house I'd bought, but would never belong to. The truck's heater hummed as I drove through the familiar streets of Denver. Capitol Hill was all around me, every corner holding a memory of the man I used to be, the man who believed family was everything, who would have given his last dime to see his son smile. That man was a fool. I stopped at a red light on Colfax and Broadway, watching a young dad load Christmas gifts into his SUV while his kids pressed their faces to the window, fogging up the glass. That used to be Ben and me. Before Jessica, before I became a walking ATM with inconvenient feelings, the numbers started running through my head. $2,800 a month, every month, for 5 years. My calculator had practically given up last spring when I finally tallied it all. $140,000, more money than my wife Sarah and I had managed to save for our entire retirement. Gone. Just gone. I hit the gas a little too hard when the light turned green. The truck growled, matching my mood. 16th Street. That's where I'd refinanced my house, our house, Sarah's and mine, to cover their down payment. The loan officer had looked at me with a pity I didn't understand at the time. Mr. Miller, are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment. Not my son's future. Someone else's investment. Larimer Street. The bank where I took out a second mortgage when Ben lost his job 2 years ago. It's just temporary, Dad. Just until I get back on my feet. Jessica had stood behind him, a $700 purse on her shoulder, nodding sympathetically while probably calculating how much my desperation was worth. As it turned out, it was worth nothing to them. I pulled into my own driveway, the one with cracked concrete I couldn't afford to fix because every spare dollar went into their perfect suburban dream. The porch light flickered, another repair I kept putting off. Inside, the house felt empty without Sarah's laugh, without the warmth of family gatherings that would never happen here again. My phone rang as I fumbled for my keys. It was Jessica. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 5 years for this conversation. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, just to make her wonder. David. Jessica's voice was full of fake sweetness, the same tone she used when she needed me to cover their water bill or property taxes. I heard about the little misunderstanding with Ben. Misunderstanding? I leaned against my kitchen counter, still in my coat. I don't think there was any misunderstanding, Jessica. You made your position perfectly clear. Look, I know this seems harsh, but you have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. A certain atmosphere, I repeated. And what kind of atmosphere is that? There was a pause. I could hear shopping bags rustling. She was probably out spending money that should have been going to their mortgage. My money. Well, they're not used to your kind of cooking, all that garlicky Italian food and loud music. And frankly, David, they're educated people. They expect conversation about current events, literature, art. You know, the words hit me hard. 8 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing insults for Ben's sake, of pretending not to see the way she looked at me like I was the hired help. My kind of cooking, my voice was steady, controlled. You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 3 years when you two were broke? The lasagna you said reminded you of your grandmother's? That was different. We were appreciative then. But now with my parents... Now with your parents, you can't have the working-class peasant embarrassing you at your fancy dinner party. The fake sweetness in her voice vanished. Don't be dramatic, David. This isn't about ethnicity. It's about class. My father graduated top of his class from the University of Colorado. My mother speaks 4 languages. They summer in Aspen. What exactly would you contribute to the conversation? Stories about running a construction crew? A hot anger rose in my chest, but I kept my voice level. I built a business from the ground up after your husband's grandfather passed away. I've employed over 50 people. I've paid more in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, David. Breeding matters, education matters, and frankly, Sarah understood her place better than you seem to understand yours. The line went silent. She had crossed a line I didn't even know was there until she stomped all over it in her designer shoes. What did you just say about my wife? I'm just saying she knew how to blend in. She didn't make waves. She understood that some spaces weren't meant for her. My hand tightened on the phone until my knuckles were white. Sarah had more class in her little finger than your entire family tree will ever have. Oh, please. She was a housekeeper who got lucky. At least she was smart enough to keep quiet about it. Jessica, my voice dropped to a low, unfamiliar tone. I want you to listen to me very carefully. This conversation is over. We are done pretending to be a family. You can't just... We're done, I repeated, and I hung up the phone. I set the phone down gently on the counter. My hands were surprisingly steady. The kitchen felt different, smaller but cleaner, like a heavy weight had been lifted. I walked over to the desk in the corner and pulled out a manila folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements, mortgage documents, 5 years of automatic payments that had bled me dry while they lived like royalty. It was time to stop the bleeding. The documents were spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. 5 years of bank statements, all showing the same automatic transfer, $2,800 on the 15th of every month, disappearing from my account and into theirs, a paper trail of my own foolishness. I grabbed my calculator. The first year, I'd given them $3,600. The second, another $3,600. By the third year, I had stopped buying new clothes for myself. The fourth year, I started shopping at discount grocery stores. This year, the fifth, I'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch just to make ends meet. $168,000. And that didn't even count the down payment or the times I'd covered their utilities when Jessica's shopping got out of control. It didn't count the new roof, the landscaping, or the furniture that was so essential for their lifestyle. I leaned back, staring at the numbers until they blurred. Sarah's life insurance money, my retirement savings, the college fund we'd started for grandchildren I would apparently never be allowed to see. It was all gone, poured into a house where I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner. I picked up my phone and dialed my bank. The automated system offered me options. How thoughtful. Customer service, this is Jennifer. This. How can I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Certainly, sir. I'll just need your account number and some verification information. I gave her the numbers and listened to her type. She was professional, efficient, not judging why a 62-year-old man was canceling payments that were likely for his son's mortgage. I see the transfer you're referring to, Mr. Miller. $2,800 monthly to Wells Fargo, account ending in 7423. How long have you been making this transfer? 5 years. The words tasted like ash. And you want to cancel it, effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen, at the old appliances I couldn't afford to replace, at the walls that needed a new coat of paint, at the windows that let in a draft because I'd spent my home improvement fund on someone else's castle. Effective immediately, I confirmed. Done. The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, surprised by how good it felt to say it. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden silence of my house. Outside, the December darkness was falling over Denver, and Christmas lights were twinkling in windows where families were gathering without conditions, without judgment. For the first time in 5 years, my budget for next month would actually balance. For the first time since Sarah died, I could afford to fix my porch light, buy decent groceries, maybe even take a vacation. I gathered up all the bank statements, the mortgage papers, all the proof of my generosity. Then I walked to my fireplace, struck a match, and watched 5 years of being a martyr turn to ash. The fire felt warm on my face, warmer than I'd felt in a long, long time. My phone buzzed with a text. It was probably Ben wanting to apologize, or Jessica needing money for something essential like new throw pillows. I didn't even look at it. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive. Tonight was special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to Sarah's picture on the mantel, and to the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said, and I meant it. The next morning was crisp and clear. December sunlight streamed into my kitchen as I enjoyed my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't mentally calculating how much money would be vanishing from my account in 3 days. The freedom tasted better than the expensive coffee blend I'd finally let myself buy. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m. Jessica's name flashed on the screen like a hazard sign. David, her voice had that familiar, impatient edge. I need you to pick up my parents from Denver International. Their flight from Portland lands at 2. I set my mug down carefully. Jessica, did you forget our conversation yesterday? Look, whatever that was about, we need to focus on practical things now. My parents need a ride, and you're the only one with free time during the day. The nerve was stunning. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't good enough to share Christmas dinner with her family, she expected me to be their personal driver. And you're asking me because that's what family does, David. They help each other out. Her voice sharpened. Besides, let's be honest. You're not my rival. You're too weak to be my rival, so just get in your truck and go pick them up. There it was, the final insult, wrapped up as an order. What airline? I asked quietly. Alaska Air, Flight 447. They'll be at baggage claim carousel 3. And David? They're expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping on something, probably the granite countertop I'd paid for. Of course, I said. I'll take care of everything. Good. And wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Ben's graduation. They notice things like that. The line went dead. She didn't even say thank you. I leaned back in my chair, looking at my phone. 2 o'clock. Flight 407, Carousel 3. I glanced at the clock. 10:52 a.m., plenty of time. I poured another cup of coffee, added an extra spoon of sugar, and opened yesterday's newspaper to the crossword puzzle. 7 across. Delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would come to me. At 2:15 p.m., I was settling into my favorite armchair with a fresh cup of Earl Grey tea and the Denver Post's Sunday edition. The completed crossword puzzle sat on my coffee table. Postponement. My phone buzzed. Isabella's name again. I let it ring. The December sun was slanting through my living room windows, warming the space where I'd spent so many lonely nights counting the cost of my generosity. Today, the silence felt different. It felt earned. 2:47 p.m. The phone buzzed again. I could see the text preview. Dad, where are you? My parents are... I flipped the phone face down and went back to the sports section. The Broncos had lost again. Some things never change. By 3:30, my phone had buzzed 6 more times. I'd finished the paper, made another pot of tea, and started cleaning out the junk drawer in my kitchen. It's amazing what you can get done when you're not running around for people who treat you like a bellhop. The 7th call came at 3:45. It was an unknown number, probably her parents using someone else's phone. I let that one go to voicemail, too. Outside, a neighbor was hanging Christmas lights while his kids ran around the yard with that special kind of December energy. Normal families doing normal things. No one was stranded at an airport waiting for someone who was never going to show up. 4:15 p.m. My phone started ringing and didn't stop. Jessica, then the unknown number, then Jessica again. The buzzing was constant, like an angry bee trapped in a jar. I walked into the kitchen and unplugged my landline. Then I turned my cell phone off completely. Perfect silence. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and heated up a can of tomato soup. Comfort food I hadn't allowed myself in months because every dollar had been stretched thin to subsidize their lifestyle. The cheese was perfectly melted, the soup steaming in my favorite mug. Outside, the winter sun was setting, casting long shadows across my yard. Somewhere across town, 3 people were probably standing in an airport parking garage, arguing about a taxi and wondering how their personal servant had dared to abandon them. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 5 p.m., I had eaten, loaded the dishwasher, and was thinking about what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had a whole evening to myself without worrying about an emergency call for money or a last-minute favor. I was reaching for the remote when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding, the kind of angry hammering that shakes the whole door frame. I set down my tea and walked slowly to the door, already knowing exactly who I would find on the other side. The pounding got louder as I got closer. Through the peephole, I could see 3 figures huddled on my small porch. I opened the door to find Robert Jenkins's red face just inches from mine. "What the hell's wrong with you?" he yelled, pushing past me into my living room. "We waited at that goddamn airport for over 3 hours. His wife, Susan, followed him in, her normally perfect hair a mess, her lips a thin, angry line. "This is completely unacceptable behavior, David. Absolutely barbaric." Jessica brought up the rear, her designer coat wrinkled, her makeup smeared. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a $60 taxi because of you. Get out of my house." My voice cut through their rage like a knife. They all stopped talking, shocked by the steel in my voice. "Excuse me?" Robert's face went from red to purple. "You don't get to make demands, buddy, not after what you pulled." "This is my house," I said quietly, standing my ground by the door. "And I want you out. Now." Susan stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "David, you clearly don't understand the magnitude of your mistake. My husband has connections all over this city. Business connections, social connections. You can't treat people like us this way and expect—" "This was a lesson for you," I interrupted, meeting her gaze. "A lesson about your arrogance and how you treat people you think are beneath you." Jessica's mouth dropped open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're a nobody. I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service." I stepped aside and held the door open wider. "The lesson is over. You can leave." Robert jabbed a finger at my chest but didn't quite touch me. "You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. I've been in this town a long time. I know people. Important people. People who can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. Jenkins?" "It's a promise," he whispered menacingly. "You think abandoning elderly people at an airport is something you can just get away with? You're about to learn how wrong you are." Susan nodded, her smile sharp. "Indeed. Actions have consequences, David, and yours will be quite public." Jessica grabbed her father's arm. "Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old man isn't worth our time." They filed out, but Robert turned back at the door. "You'll regret this," he said. "I guarantee it." I closed the door and slid the deadbolt home with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them get into their rental car, still arguing as they drove off into the dark. The house felt cleaner now that they were gone, but their parting words echoed in the quiet. Public consequences, important people, connections. I walked back to my living room and picked up my tea. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt a flicker of concern, but it was quickly replaced by something much stronger. Anticipation. 3 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee and reading the Denver Post when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3. The headline read, "Local businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm." My hands froze around my coffee mug. There I was, in an old photo from my company's website, probably 5 years out of date. Below it was a story that made my blood run cold. Robert and Susan Jenkins, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at Denver International Airport for over 4 hours on Sunday, when family member David Miller failed to show up for a prearranged ride. The couple, both in their late 50s, waited in frigid temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. A winter storm warning. It had been 52 degrees and sunny. "We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that," said Robert Jenkins, a retired investment banker. "We called repeatedly, but Mr. Miller never answered. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather. At our age, this kind of treatment isn't just inconsiderate, it's dangerous." The article went on, with quotes about my pattern of erratic behavior and concerns about my mental state. Robert had painted them as helpless victims of a cruel old man who had snapped for no reason. There was no mention of the Christmas dinner ban, no context about Jessica's demands or their years of financial exploitation. Just me, the villain who abandoned poor elderly tourists in a blizzard that only existed in Robert's imagination. I put down my coffee and read the article again, slowly. Then, a third time. The byline was Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor. I didn't know the name, but I knew the strategy. Robert had called in a favor, used his connections to get this story placed where it would do the most damage to my reputation. Smart. Very smart. For the first time, I felt a grudging respect for my opponents. They weren't just entitled brats throwing a tantrum, they were strategic. They understood that in a city like Denver, reputation is everything. One well-placed newspaper article could destroy a lifetime of hard work. They had declared war. I folded the newspaper and set it aside. My mind was already shifting into the methodical planning mode that had helped me build my business from nothing. This wasn't about an airport pickup anymore. This was about winning. I opened my laptop and started searching. Robert Jenkins, Susan Jenkins, Jessica Miller. Their social media, their connections, their weaknesses, everything they had foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play chess, I would show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at my calendar. December 18th. 7 days until Christmas. 7 days to plan something they would never, ever forget. For the next 3 days, I lived in a different world. I wasn't David Miller, the broken-down old man who let his family walk all over him. I was David Miller, businessman, strategic thinker, a man who had built something from nothing and wasn't about to let a bunch of parasites destroy it. My laptop was my command center. Social media profiles were spread across my browser tabs like cards in a high-stakes poker game. Robert Jenkins, retired investment bank manager, member of the Cherry Creek Country Club, treasurer of the Colorado Business Leaders Association. A man who had spent his career in positions of trust, a man with a lot to lose. Susan's Instagram was a perfect picture of a refined life. Charity lunches, wine tastings, vacation photos from Vail tagged with Erotsru Blessed Life. Every post was carefully curated to project success, all of it built on other people's money. My money. Jessica's Facebook told the real story. Posts about our beautiful home, with pictures of the kitchen I'd paid for, check-ins at expensive restaurants during the months I was covering their utility bills. A status update from last week, so excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills, our home, our success. The narcissism was astounding. But it was Ben's LinkedIn profile that gave me the final piece of the puzzle. His recent activity showed a new connection. Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor at the Denver Post. The same Patricia Morrison who wrote the hit piece on me. I leaned back, looking at the evidence on my screen. They had made 3 critical mistakes. First, they had completely underestimated me. Second, they had made their attack public, which meant I could make my response public. And third, they had documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of their hypocrisy. I clicked over to Patricia Morrison's profile. A 5-minute search of local business directories confirmed it. 3 mutual connections between Robert and Patricia's editor-in-chief. The story hadn't just appeared. It had been carefully planted. Amateur hour. I opened a new document and started typing. Not a response to their attack, but something much better. A timeline. 5 years of financial support, documented with bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks. The down payment on their house, $47,000 from my home equity loan. The kitchen remodel, $18,000 on my credit card, 60 monthly mortgage payments of $2,800 each, $168,000 and counting, $250,000, more than I'd spent on myself in the last 10 years. By evening, I had everything organized in a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Bank statements, receipts, photos from their social media showing off things I'd paid for, and a printed copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins, documenting every single lie. I looked at my calendar. December 24th was circled in red, not because it was Christmas, but because it was the perfect day for justice. According to Jessica's Facebook, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 12 people. Friends, neighbors, people from their social circle, the kind of people who read the Denver Post and form opinions based on what they see, the kind of people who deserve to know the truth. I closed my laptop and went to get my good camera, the one I'd bought years ago to document job sites for my construction business. It was time to document something else entirely. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. And tomorrow, Robert Jenkins and his family were going to learn what happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight. Christmas Eve morning was gray and cold, the kind of Denver winter day that makes you grateful for a warm house. I laid out my evidence like a lawyer preparing for court. Bank statements, receipts, and photos, all copied 12 times, 1 for each dinner guest. The newspaper article was on top of each stack, my notes in red pen clearly visible. Lie, written next to Robert's quotes about the weather. False. Next to the claim about my erratic behavior. Missing context, highlighted where they'd failed to mention 5 years of financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral. Today, I was saying goodbye to the man who had been a doormat. Tonight, I would be someone who commanded respect. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded my briefcase with the evidence and drove to Cherry Creek. Their house was glowing with warm light, cars lining the street. Through the windows, I could see people moving around the dining room. with Jessica playing the perfect hostess in the home my money had kept for them. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45. Perfect. Everyone would be seated for dinner. No easy escape. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Jessica loved showing off how safe their neighborhood was. I let myself in quietly. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted from the dining room. Then I heard Susan say, "But darling, that's not how we do things in our family." Our family. After everything they'd done to kick me out of it. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase. 12 faces turned to look at me, their expressions a mix of surprise and horror. Jessica froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Ben went pale. Robert and Susan looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on their marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Jessica found her voice first. "David, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave, immediately." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize leaned forward. "What is he talking about, Jessica?" "He's having some kind of episode," Jessica said quickly. "Ben, call someone." But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents in front of each guest. "Here are the bank records," I said conversationally. 5 years of financial support, $168,000 in mortgage payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room went silent except for the rustle of paper as 12 people started looking at the evidence. I watched their faces change as they saw the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof. "This is," one man started, staring at a bank statement. "Outrageous," finished a woman across from him. "Jessica, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Jessica's composure was cracking. "It's more complicated than that. David volunteered to help us. We never asked." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out the newspaper article, "let's talk about what you did ask for and what you told the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I placed copies of the article on the table, watching as the guests recognized my photo from the story that had run 3 days ago. "Now," I said, my voice carrying through the silence, "let's talk about the real manipulators in this family." Robert's face was ashen. Susan sat rigid in her chair. "Mr. Jenkins here used his connections to plant this story," I continued, tapping the newspaper. "Notice how I'm portrayed as unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor, elderly people in freezing weather." A gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up. "Robert, what's this about?" "The weather was 52 degrees and sunny," I said before Robert could answer, "and they weren't stranded tourists. They were Jessica's parents, coming to the Christmas dinner I was banned from because I wasn't good enough for them." Susan finally spoke. "That's not... We never said..." "You never said what, Susan?" I pulled out my phone, where I'd saved screenshots of Jessica's social media posts. "That I was too low class for your parents? That my Italian food and working class conversation would embarrass you?" The woman I'd pegged as one of Susan's charity friends shifted uncomfortably. "Susan, surely you didn't..." "He's twisting everything," Robert blustered, but his voice had no conviction. "This man has serious mental health issues, the stress of aging, financial problems." "Financial problems?" I almost laughed. "Mr. Jenkins, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $3,000 a month for 5 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have." I turned to the whole table. "These people have taken over $200,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They've manipulated my son against me, banned me from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the newspaper." Ben spoke for the first time, his voice a whisper. "Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper." "Your wife knew," I said quietly, "and her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain for refusing to be their personal ATM and chauffeur." The dynamic in the room was shifting. I could see it in the guests' faces as they realized the generous hosts they were dining with were liars. "This is unconscionable," said an elderly woman in pearl, staring at the bank statements. "Robert, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this man, then attack him publicly when he stopped?" Robert's carefully constructed image was crumbling. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly," the woman shot back. "This man supported your family, and when he finally said no, you tried to ruin him." Susan's voice was strangled. "He abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas because my presence was inappropriate for your parents," I said calmly. "After 5 years of paying their bills while you looked down on me for my background?" The silence was deafening. 12 people were staring at Robert and Susan with disgust and embarrassment. Jessica made one last, desperate attempt. "Everyone, please. This is a family matter that's gotten out of hand." "No," I said firmly. "This stopped being a family matter when you made it public. When you used the newspaper to attack my character." I looked around the table at the faces that now knew exactly who I was. "I wanted you all to know the truth before you read about David Miller in the paper again, because you will read about me again. But next time, it'll be the real story." I closed my briefcase and straightened my tie. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for." As I walked out the door, I could hear the eruption behind me. Raised voices, accusations, the sound of a carefully built social facade shattering into a million pieces. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I had ever heard. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, delivered by certified mail. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. 3 months of missed mortgage payments had finally caught up with Ben and Jessica. $8,400 in arrears. 14 days to pay up or face foreclosure on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and went back to my coffee. It was interesting, but it wasn't my problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks with desperate calls. Jessica's number was blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. Robert and Susan, whose social standing in Denver, had vanished after their Christmas dinner humiliation. And even Ben, whose calls I'd been ignoring, curious to see how long it would take him to swallow his pride. The answer, apparently, was 97 days. He knocked on my door that Thursday evening. He wasn't the confident man who had kicked me out of Christmas anymore. He looked like he'd aged 10 years and 3 months. "Dad," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." I let him in. He looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck, the fresh paint on the walls. The repairs I could finally afford, now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's dream. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of on people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee?" He shook his head, sitting on the edge of my couch. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am about everything. Christmas, the newspaper, the way Jessica, the way we treated you." "Go on." "I didn't know about Robert planning that story, I swear. When I found out, Jesus, Dad, the things they said about you, the way they talked about our family, about Mom's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Sarah, but my voice stayed level. "And what did they say about your mother?" "That she knew her place better than you knew yours, that she understood boundaries." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence. "The house is in foreclosure," Ben said finally. "I know. We can't make the payments without—" He stopped, realizing how it sounded. "Without my help," I finished for him. "Without the money I sent every month while you let your wife's family treat me like dirt." "I know how it looks, Ben," I leaned forward. "Do you know how much money I sent you over 5 years?" He nodded miserably. "Jessica calculated it, over $200,000. 237,168 hours, I corrected. "I know the exact amount because I finally added it all up." His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son. That money is gone, and more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years I could have been building a relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy." I know that now." He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "But maybe we could start over? Maybe there's a way to—" Are you asking me to start paying the mortgage again? The hope in his eyes died. We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Jessica's respect for me, her parents' approval. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. He started to cry then, quietly. I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever. I watched him for a long moment, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for. Ben, I said finally, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean I'm going to start paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I be grateful for scraps of your attention. Then what does it mean? I stood up and walked to the mantel, where Sarah's photo sat next to a new one. Me with my sister Carol and her family at Easter, the first holiday I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect instead of demanding I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's convenient. I turned back to him. And it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me, you'll remember who actually acts like family. He nodded slowly, finally understanding. Finally, the house, he asked quietly, isn't my problem anymore. You're a grown man, Ben. Figure it out. Get a job that pays your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can actually afford. Stop living beyond your means. He stood up slowly, his shoulders straight for the first time since he'd arrived. You're right. About all of it. He walked to the door, then turned back. Dad, for what it's worth, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, but proud too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stepped out onto my back porch. Spring was coming to Denver. The trees were starting to bud, the air warm with promise. I'd wasted 5 years of my life being a doormat. I wasn't planning on wasting any more. My phone buzzed, a text from Carol. Dinner Sunday? The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to a show where I wasn't welcome on stage. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.